Well, welcome everyone back to Breaking the Silence. Before I go any further, Mary has reminded me to suggest to you that you hit the like button and the subscribe button because it really helps us a lot and it costs you nothing. That is, not unless you decide to become a member of our YouTube channel, which will really help support this channel because quite frankly, we're not getting a lot of support. We're getting support from you, our core group, the people we care about the very, very most. And that you are the people who have these experiences or are deeply invested in your interests in this subject. And um, you have been very, very, very gracious and helpful and much appreciated. But if you're new and you're watching this channel all the time, and I see we have well over 10,000 members, and we're on our way to many more. It would be great if you just joined the channel. So thank you if you do, and thank you for those of you that have become members. Other thing I'm going to promote is this. Yes, of course, the welcome to help spread the word button is blocking the bottom of the poster, but I think many of you have seen it by now. And they are starting to sell, and we have them in stock now. And of course, the inspiration for this was from, of course, X-Files, but X-Files had it wrong, in my opinion, because believing in something is kind of weak, but knowing something is entirely different. And a great number of us here do know, but we want to know more. So we want to know. So that has become kind of the slogan in this poster I did. It's my art, and I plan to do more posters and more art in this way. Not all of them will have the slogan on it. So a lot of them will have the art, things like this will be in some of the art. And this, yes, I did that before 9/11. And so on and so forth. And also, before we go any further, I want to remind you that's not the poster, but it's the book cover. But I'm pushing a lot of people who are new to this channel who have not seen But Something Is There, the movie, to go take a look at it this weekend. It's always on the channel, but it's probably the least seen film, not documentary, on this subject matter that's ever been made. I think we have 90,000 views. The film's been done since 2018. It has Whitley Strieber in it as himself, Yvonne Smith in it as herself. And as I said, this is not a documentary. It's a film about my experiences since I've been a little child. And we had a full crew. We made sets. It was a full-on production, and I think you'd really enjoy seeing it. It was done back in 2018. And I see Kim is here. She got in. Let me get rid of this and bring her on. Hey, Kim, you made it.
I made it. Whew, it was like technical difficulties, but I got there.
Well, you did great. Thank you for coming on. And we haven't talked. We've known each other for a long time, but we haven't talked for a while. I think the last time that I talked to you was down in, was it Huntington Beach at one of your meetings?
Probably at the meeting, yeah. Yeah, that one luckily is right up the street from me, so it's close.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. For us, we're in Ventura, and everything's a long drive for us. So at least an hour into LA, but to go to Duarte or down to you is quite a haul.
Yeah.
So, but we will get down there. We get to Yvonne's as well. So we've been having our own meetings up here, which have been doing well. So we're all three of us helping people and having joy in that.
Great.
So we have you here tonight to talk about not just your work, but your personal experience. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because you've had these you have these experiences like the rest of us.
Yeah. It took me a while to kind of realize I actually did have all this stuff. I just kind of thought early on it was paranormal, and then, or I didn't really think about it. And then when I was 16, I was driving, I lived in Claremont, right? And it was funny, Barbara Lamb lived there the whole time.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And with, grew up through high school. But when I was 16, I was driving up Indian Hill with a girlfriend of mine, and we start hearing this hum, and we're in this old Rambler that my dad kind of glued back together. He got it for $75 for me and my sister.
excuse me.
And I kind of finally looked up, and I could see just right ahead, right through the tree canopy, a black triangle that looked a lot like the one you had on your graphic.
Right.
It,
That poster, yeah.
yeah, it was broad daylight, low. I mean, I could see the lights on the corners and like a little kind of thing in the middle, like a dome kind of thing. And
What year was that?
go ahead.
What year was that?
It was 75. It was before Travis Walton had his thing. It was just probably a few months before that. And I, we looked at it, and I still, even the more recent UFO that I saw, I'm doing that thing in my head of what is that a hell, what is that? Because it was going as slow as we were. And I just kind of went along watching it, and then it sort of veered off towards the colleges, and we tried to follow it, but then it just vanished somewhere over the treetops. And so we went up to our house, which is above the high school, and told my parents. And my dad, was in aerospace and nuclear
That makes
physics.
sense.
What's that?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things you usually see. And so they were like, I don't know. And I didn't know what MUFON was even. So we called the police and got kind of, yeah, that thing.
Yeah,
And
sure.
yeah, hung up. And that I just thought, okay, because those UFO people are a little weird, and
We
just
sure are.
let it go,
Kind of.
And they'd always have that guy with the foil hat on if they had anybody, and
Mine's
so
an Ethan hat.
yeah, it's in there. But yeah, and then years later, I was kind of leaving. I did civil design, computer graphics before PCs, and worked on 3 different programs, and I kind of wound up on designing the toll roads in Orange County conceptually, and
Oh,
land surveying, that whole more practical thing. And my husband's a chemical engineer and operations manager before he retired. And got, I feel like once I understood my own personal karma, I got kind of just launched out into what I do now almost by accident. I mean, it felt that way. And I accidentally got a job reading cards, and I just, my husband about had a heart attack, thought I was going to have to get a turban or something. But, and then I had tried a past life regression, and it helped me kind of overcome a phobia I had developed that came right out of a past life. And then I was practicing. I trained with Dr. Brian Weiss, who's kind of like the John Mack of
mhm.
life stuff. And I was practicing on my friends, and my friend that I've known since second grade, we did a hypnosis session, and she couldn't seem to get past the park area. And finally, I just said, okay, let's look around the park. And she said she was stuck to a stone bench. It looked like the Arboretum, which was right next door to the high school that we'd go over to all the time. And it looked greener, more lush. She said it almost looked fake or something. She couldn't hear any noise, any animals. There didn't seem to be any people except for some men right around her. And she kept waking up, which I've never had anybody do that. She kept hearing her mom calling her, just strange things. And I just say, okay, close your eyes. And then we'd go a little more. And then she started panicking and she said, they're weirdly thin. She was like whispering to me. And
Weirdly.
weirdly thin, yeah. And I said, you know, I just listened. And then she said, I don't think they're people. And I had her floating up out. And I said, what do you think they are? But I knew. And she said, aliens. And then she popped her eyes open and we were both kind of like, huh. Because at the time, you know, I'd kind of gotten her into computer graphics and she also was working as an engineer, Hughes Aircraft.
Mhm.
And
Oh, wow. There's that
yeah,
connection again. It's with all of us.
exactly. Even her husband he just passed away recently, but he's Native American. And I had gotten Wendy to coming to the Cerro meetings and MUFON occasionally. And then I guess out of the blue, after they'd been together 30 some years, he said, yeah, I saw a UFO when I was a kid. And it's like, what? You know, but I guess on the reservation where I grew up. And that totally shocked her. And that's kind of what happened to me just over time. Like, my uncle, I realized he had been talking about little green men in the desert, and he was a long haul truck driver, and their house was haunted. And my aunt had talked about waking up paralyzed and seeing a hooded figure in the room with, she couldn't see the
Mhm.
face. And sometimes there were three of them. And just really, you know, I thought it was paranormal because my dad's mom, my uncle, you know, that's his next older brother, she was very psychic, weighed a pound and a half at birth. And, you know, it's a miracle she lived. And then they put her in a little cigar box behind the wood burning stove. And she got orphaned and grew up in the Oddfellows home, which is kind of an offshoot of Freemasonry and
Hmm.
um, spiritualist. So she'd astral project all the time, very psychic. My uncle was pretty psychic. And so then my cousin, out of the blue, after he had passed away, brought up, she says, yeah, did they ever tell you about the time the whole family was abducted? And I'm like, no. And they had a situation where they were driving home from Washington, where my dad was from. And they saw a light. It was kind of like, but you know, Barney and Betty Hill, but
Yeah, Barney and Betty Hill.
yeah, it was following them. And then they kind of fell asleep. They thought they came to about 30 miles down the road at like 2 to 3 hours later and had missing time. And, you know, and so a lot of that I didn't know until later, much later. But I had, you know, after that, I had heard of Yvonne Smith. So I contacted her thinking she could help me with the blocks, you know, that my friend had run into. Cause you don't run into that too much in the past life hypnosis.
Hmm.
And
The
she,
blocks.
yeah, the blocks. Yeah, like that, like where it feels like you're getting it messed with or interrupted. And she was speaking at MUFON. And so I brought my friend Wendy, and there were a couple of the abductees speaking, and Yvonne spoke. And I've always seen energy, you know, when I'm in a more relaxed state. And I was watching them talking, and the one guy had a green aura. And then all of a sudden, he'd get upset when he was describing his experiences, and he would split his aura right here, and it would go kind of like a lavender, deeper blue lavender color. The rest would stay green. And I just remember thinking, what is that? I'd never seen anything like it. And then somebody asked him if he had any implants, and he pointed at the back of his neck. And I thought, that's interesting. I'd never heard of that. And then after that, I noticed some of the speakers, even if they would, a lot of speakers at the time, even if they had experience, would just be, I'm a researcher. But I would
Yeah.
see like a shaft of blue light coming down to them at certain points. And I remember thinking, are they getting influenced or what's happening? But something kind of kicked in me, and I almost think that was more for me than my friend. And I started going to MUFON every month. I was just like, kind of like, got to find all this stuff out. And Melinda Leslie went to the same MUFON, and so did Bob Wood, Dr. Bob Wood, and there were some really interesting people at that Orange County MUFON. And she said, well, why don't you come to the CERO, which is Yvonne Smith's group? And so I started going, and it was in those meetings where I'd be like, oh, and there was this thing that happened to me when I was a little kid, like year and a half old, and I was in the crib.
Mhm.
My dad at the time was, I think, working for the Navy, like torpedoes, missiles. Actually says missiles on my birth certificate's his occupation.
Yeah.
And I my mom put me to bed, and I had on my nightgown, and it was just unusual. Normally she took my socks off, and she didn't take them off that night. And so I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do? And she told me to just lay them next to me. And so I'm real careful, got them laid out. And the rails were to my back, and I'm kind of looking at the wall with the socks. And the door to the room was behind that. And I didn't feel like I fell asleep, but I kind of saw some movement towards the headboard. And I looked up, and there was a little, what to me, I think it was a screen memory, a little wooden man walking up towards my socks. And he grabbed the end of it. And, when you're little like that, you're just kind of like, oh, what's that? It
Mhm.
didn't strike me as anything weird, but then he turned and with the sock over his shoulder and started walking back towards the headboard. And there was like a telepathic communication of, what are you doing? And he said he was taking the sock home. So I thought, oh my God. And I grabbed at it, and it was like he jumped. I thought in my mind he went between the mattress and the headboard, but he could have just gone through a portal or through the headboard. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I saw the sock flipping away behind him. So I got up and started screaming bloody murder at the handrail, for my parents to get in there to stop the thief. Not that there was a little wooden man in my crib, but that this thief took my sock.
Yeah.
And they came flying in, and my dad looked kind of just confused, and my mom had this like little smirk on her face as I'm trying to tell them what happened. And I'd never seen that before, but I really didn't like it. And so I had them get me out, and my dad took the mattress out, and we looked, but the sock was gone. And so
Mhm.
it was kind of the family,
Just one sock?
just one, the
That
one that
explains everything to me
grabbed.
now.
And so, yeah, it was like the family joke. I ate my sock.
Mhm.
But years later, when I thought back to that, I realized that I don't know why I had the feeling it was so I would know it happened. And I've noticed that since working with clients, a lot of times in abductions, there's a weird glitch of some sort, or it's like this happens up to this point, don't know what happens, then they pick it up here through the end, or
It's
they,
true. It's
yeah.
true. Yeah.
And so it kind of haunts you, like what was that about? And I know in that house, I was under 4.5, and I realized also in the serial meetings that I kind of had this memory of I would leave the house, walk out. We were on the end of a cul-de-sac through the opening around Pacific Coast Highway, around the corner, and go to the dentist by myself. And, I'm thinking, what? That can't be right. I was just 4 or 3, like,
Yeah,
and
you
that,
didn't go to the dentist by yourself. You know,
yeah. And
I have
some,
memories like that.
it's just, yeah, it's weird. And
Weird.
so,
It's just
like,
weird.
yeah, I remember even like out of body seeing myself in the chair, and there's seemed like human looking to me, but I don't, you know, it was probably screen memory, and white coats. And every once in a while I'd see my mom there, and I asked her about it, and she just was kind of, yeah, I don't know, you know, like she didn't really know what to say about it. And, you know, so, and then I even had another memory where my sister and a little friend, we took the rail to the bunk bed with the two steps, and we put our little, you know, 50s cotton underwear over our heads with the leg holes here. And
Mhm.
we came marching out and told my parents we were moon men.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it, you know, there are just these weird memories of things that I, you know, just pushed aside, or you just kind of compartmentalize. And then later, all these pieces started coming together. So yeah, it's odd. And I know it even got so to the point of my brother's wife's mother. She was in town with my nephew, and she just said, I noticed you have some, you know, books on UFOs and things like that. And she said, what's your interest? And I told her, and that I kind of helped Yvonne, like I backed her up with the group. And she said, oh, do you know who J. Allen Hynek is? And I'm like, yeah. And it's her uncle. So I thought, of course it's her uncle, you know, like, why wouldn't it be? So there were just so many things like that, that, you know, or even 2013, I got a message on Facebook, and it was Christopher Bledsoe, you know, that just wrote the UFOs of God, and
Right.
looking, you know, trying to figure out what was going on with him. And I, you know, I didn't know him, but he seemed very nice, you know, and I kind of put him in our group and, you know, talked to him about his experiences. But I know I'm fortunate because my family was open to all of that. Like my mom saw ghosts, still sees them. I see them.
Mhm.
You know, my dad's mom, that whole side, you know, totally open to it. So it really wasn't like, you know, you're crazy or don't talk about it. And even my husband, you know, for years, you know, he was kind of not, just not interested. Like the paranormal, some of that stuff, he saw enough stuff that he kind of opened his mind. But the one UFO that I saw off our deck, my friend was over, and we're working on a book about my weirdness. And we went up to the deck. It was about, you know, 5:30 on the 4th of July. I think it was 2021. And we were looking, our deck looks kind of facing the ocean, and the fireworks would be a little to the right off the pier. And there's these like big eucalyptus trees in a park on the one side, and then our street kind of goes down a block and curves to the right. And I just see her looking, and her husband's by her, and her daughter's behind me, and my husband's screwing around with chairs. And she looks and she goes, is that a UFO? And I look, and there it is, just sitting right there, a black rectangular block or half away. I would guess it to be about 30 feet long and a story high. And it had kind of a weird top shape to it. And I'm looking at it, and my brain again, I said, could that be a drone? You know, like I'm just trying to think logically. And her husband and her daughter said, no, that's way too big. And my husband never looked. We're all standing there with our phones. Nobody took a picture. We
Yeah,
just,
that's typical.
I know, it's so annoying. And
It
then
is.
the planes flew by, and we just went downstairs and had dinner. And then we went back up to watch the fireworks. And we're all like, why didn't we take a picture of that? And then after that, I compared notes with her, and she saw what I saw, but mirrored. So
Weird.
the weird shape was on the bottom. And then we started asking her daughter and her husband about it. And this is more recently. Her daughter said she just saw a line, and her husband said it was a dot. And I'm like, and he said that's too big to be a drone, but he says it's a dot. So the weird thing about that is we all saw something different. And that's, I just speculate it's, some of it's happening in your brain.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. I mean, you saw the woodman. I
Yeah.
saw the butcher block start to walk away,
Oh, gosh.
and then it became a gray, and it's just yeah.
Yeah. I had a lady recently that she came in, she'd had weird bangs and knocks. Her sister was terrified as a kid. And she had described an experience where she was in a dream, she said, by her bedroom door, just scared to death, didn't want to look, knew something was over in the room. And she finally worked up the courage and looked at it, and it was a gleaming, shiny shopping cart. And I'm like, what? And she said, I don't think that's what it was, but that's what I saw.
Oh,
So in her regression, she had told me about going to Cal State Fullerton. And I think she said it was 76. So it was pretty close to when I saw the black triangle. She was sitting on stone bench, and she said it was only wide enough for two people. And she could see kids going around, and the sun felt so good. She said she just closed her eyes and just put her head back. And then when she opened her eyes, there were two guys sitting right next to her. She goes, I don't even know how we all fit on that little bench. And she looked at the one, and then she looked over at the other one and saw he had a stack of UFO books. And she said, oh, interesting reading. And she had heard him in her head say her name, like, hi, her name. And then she looked at him, and she said she knew she was looking at the side of him, but somehow she could see the front of his face. And she said, you guys would pass. And she said,
yeah.
I don't know where that came from. And then they got up and went around the corner of the building, and she went after them. And so in the hypnosis session, she said he felt weirdly familiar. So I had her go back to when she first met him. And she said it was where they grew up. There was like a creek that ran by, and she'd go down. There was like a 10-minute walk, and a lot of times she'd fall asleep and wake up, an hour or two later. And she said, I'm down further down the creek, but it doesn't look like this. She said, this is much wider. And she said, there, I can feel them here. And then I said, well, can you look at them? And she's like, she was really didn't want to look at him. And I you know she started shaking, and I kind of grabbed her hand, and she finally looked, and she said they look like ants. And then she kind of said maybe like praying mantis. She said, but they have antenna. And she was really scared. I mean, it really freaked her out. But they told her, you are us, we are you. And before that all happened, before she came to see me, she worked transcribing things. And she said that she just had this thought of, I just want to know what's happening. I just want to know. And it was one of those pedal things, and she felt something plop on her foot. And so she, looked down, and it was just this big, ugly potato bug. And she picked it up, and then she heard in her head, you can't even look at a bug. How are you going to look at us? And I thought that was pretty interesting,
Yeah, they project. I know they do because we haven't talked for a long time, but some of the people here know about it. But it's one of the pieces I'm working on right now for one of my personal shows. And these people came to my door after my late wife had left to go to the Renaissance Fair, which she ran a booth there. And it was a Saturday
Mm.
morning. And I at first, I don't know why, I was drawn to the window and I looked out and I saw this blue car pull up. And there was a woman in there with a baby. And she looked like my wife's best friend,
Oh.
gay. And the guy got out and he looked like David Jacobs. And they came to my door and I go, what the heck are these people? They knock on the door and I open the door up and I'm looking at them and they look like the people I know, but they don't look like the people I know. And I felt strange right away. And I said, who are you? And the guy that looked like David Jacobs said, oh, come on, Steve, you know who I am. You've read all my books. And they just pushed their way in. And the minute they touched me,
Mm.
that was it. They turned me around. They took me back to the bedroom. They laid me down on my stomach, pulled my robe up, and put their hands on my back, which I felt very much a warmth. And I woke up face down on the bed with the robe still pulled up, and they were gone.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I remembered it, not without hypnosis. I don't think Yvonne and I ever did that one, but they didn't. There's the fact that they looked like people I knew just told me that they were taking stuff from my mind.
Yeah. Well,
And I can look at a bug, so I don't know what they were trying to cover up, but
yeah, recently that makes me think of, I told about it in the meeting, but we have kind of a longer, skinny house, and where I watch TV, there's a window to the side, and it was just in the afternoon, and I look over because I see movement, and there's three kids standing there in bike helmets, like gray bike helmets, and they're kind of talking to me, and I can't hear them, so I kind of motion to the back door, and then they're talking, and the one said, "Can we come in?" And I opened the door. I was like, "Okay," and I kept asking them, "Where's your bikes?" They said something about kids chasing them. And then after a minute, I realized another one and a taller one came in. And I you know, they were talking. I kept thinking my husband was going to come downstairs. He never did. And then anybody I told this to goes, "You let him in your house? Like, why'd
yeah,
you let
that's not something you would do normally.
No, and the one that kept kind of pulling my attention when I was telling my friend about it, I said, she's going, "What do he look like?" And I said, "Well, he looks like a 12-year-old you." And and but I kept going, "Are your bikes at the park?" Like I was trying to figure this out why they all were wearing bike helmets. I never got a good answer. And then they all at a certain point just left, and I realized they weren't on the ring camera, so if they left, they had to go the other way. And I really, when I told my girlfriend about it, she goes, "Are you sure they were kids?" And I'm like, in my head, they were like, they seem like
Yeah,
kids. I don't know. Yeah, it's really funny, and I couldn't 100% say they weren't, but the fact that they didn't have bikes and they were all wearing gray bike helmets, the kind of bigger head there,
yeah. Wasn't in Intruders one of Bud's cases where the woman saw construction or city workers or electrical workers that came to the doors with the metal hats with
yeah.
the hats on, hard hats. Because that happened to me. They came to the door and said, "You know what we're doing? Come on, Steve." And they showed me this little badge, and there was this big silver thing parked in the street that was not a car. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So they do that.
Yeah. And it's hard to sort it out, and then I just have some weird memories. Like I remember hearing something out the back door, and we're right on the back is on an alley, and there's a power pole and a guy pole across the street in the park, and
Mhm.
somehow in my mind I thought a helicopter was coming down right there through the alley and it went over into the park. And later when I looked, I thought there was no way a helicopter could have been there. Like there's no way it would have been where what I thought I was seeing. And I just in my head thought, oh, they must be doing drills or practice at the park or something, and or another time I was in the van after, it's funny, it was after an event with my friend, Wendy, that the hypnosis was on. And it's 2 in the morning, we're talking, and these two coyotes came walking down the road.
Boy.
Their heads were as tall as the side of her minivan, and they looked more like,
These were that tall.
yeah, they looked kind of like Anubis, long legs, but
Mhm.
it would, I mean, she turned her lights on and we just watched them go by, and we're kind of going, that was weird. And, I someday I'll have to do regressions on them for myself, but I, those little weird things happen where you just
Yeah.
kind of file it because you don't know what to make of it.
Have you heard about the jackrabbit case? That's what they call it.
I don't know. Maybe tell me.
Yufan's working on that one, and it was these. I believe it was two ladies, and they were driving down this road at night, and there were these 4 foot tall jackrabbits all over the road, and of course, jackrabbits. And then there was a fellow in Yvonne's group when I was in the support group back in the 90s who um, had to stop because a giant white rabbit went across the road, and he stopped and he followed it into an open field where a 747 was parked on the ground with the tail numbers of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek. I mean,
That's
this is how
hilarious.
do things. And of course, if you report something like that, what are people going to say? I mean, they know exactly what they're doing, but
Yeah.
again, they're pulling this stuff out of our minds and they're using it to block what's really there.
Yeah, we have a member. I remember we were talking, Yvonne and me and her, and she said, "Yeah, I was out in the backyard, and in my fire pit, this owl landed." And she said it was white, about 4 feet tall, 3.5, 4 feet tall, and just looking at me. And Yvonne and I look at each other, we're going, "I bet
I
that's
can see
not it."
Yvonne's face now.
Yeah, I looked up snowy owls. They get 2.5 feet max, and they don't
Yeah.
come this far. And then it flew up into the tree and just watched her. And we're kind of going, yeah, I don't think that was an
They'll
owl.
even follow you. I would be out walking my dog, and this one came down and flew around me, screeching. And I
Wow.
remember looking at its face, and it just seemed like the eyes were huge and slanted. And my late wife got all freaked out by it because she was already freaked out by this stuff. And that darn owl would follow me all the time. I mean,
Wow.
really, literally, you know, at night.
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. It is odd, but I have really noticed that because, I have another client that her dad, he told her this once. And when he was like in his 20s and they were back on the kind of the like Michigan or somewhere like that, he would drive up over to Canada and help like farm work, like move bales of hay to make money for college, and him and his friend would do it, and then they drive home, and the road was just straight, and this one night it curved around to the right, and then there was road workers there. They had like a barricade, and it was actually
Yeah.
a cop and then something going on. So they got out and they waited, and they actually got the badge number and name of the cop. And then eventually it cleared and they went home, and they got home 24 hours later than they should have.
Mhm.
And then they tried to look up the cop's name and didn't exist.
The
And
same thing happened to me when I was 11 up in Bernie. I just
really,
didn't know about it. Yeah. Um,
wow.
Enacted visually using CGI what exactly happened to how we were stopped in the road by a bunch of road workers in the middle of nowhere in the mountain, a little mountain road, and they looked like road workers. I mean, just big bright lights were off inside the trees, and yeah,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
still bothers me to this day when I'm driving down a road at night and there's Caltrans workers there late at night. It's still, I find it disturbing.
Yeah, you just can't be totally sure. And they do pick authority figures, doctors, nurses, road workers, cops,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know, parents, grandparents, that you would listen to. But then, then there's those glitches.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
when I noticed that all the road workers kind of look the same, like they're twins or something, you know.
Yeah. It's like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. How funny.
When
Wow.
when you saw that triangle, going back to that, and you said it hummed, that drew my attention because recently, last about 3 weeks ago or so, um, a hum such as that got my attention when I was in the garage, and I came out to look at it, and I saw this pulsating red light moving over very slowly. And you know, I'm an aviator and a pilot, and I know my aircraft, and so the pulsing red light didn't have nav lights, anti-collision lights. It was just odd. You know, you get immediately that strange feeling like this isn't right. But what was even stranger was what was next to it. It was some sort of platform that I couldn't make out, but it had all these little lights all over it, tiny little lights, like a sprinkle of them. And they were kind of twinkling. And so I went and got Celestron binoculars, and I looked at it, and I could see it more clearly. And there was definitely a shape there. The hum was like that from a helicopter, or what we call an osprey,
Oh,
rotor craft, that tilt rotor craft, but
yeah.
there was no blade sound. And I know the sounds of blades very well. I know the differences in aircraft by their sound of their blades. You know, the difference between
Yeah.
a Spitfire and a P-51 and a B-25 with twin engines. I know all the different sounds. This sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before.
Wow.
And the hum was just like almost got inside of you. It was so deep. And I
Yeah.
watched the thing go over, and you know, I didn't have the night vision camera that I have now. Darn it, or I would have got it. But you know, you heard that hum, and but that was back in '75.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just very subtle, but it was enough to where I was trying to figure out what is that or what's
Yeah,
happening. And
yeah,
the funny thing, on the book that we're working on, we were describing that what happened, and we were right on the paragraph about the hum. And we were at her house sitting next to each other, and
mhm,
all of a sudden this hum starts behind us, and there's just a wall with the desk. And I said, I looked around, I said, is that like your modem or computer or something? And she said, all of that is turned off. And then I all of a sudden I said, well, let's go look outside. And then she said, I'm going to get it on camera. And then it stopped as soon as we
yeah.
went to record it.
They're camera sensitive, um, but the
Yeah.
night vision cameras are really a good way to catch them. Right now, I had a very sweet lady send me her story on camera since we weren't able to bring her out here. She
Yeah.
recorded herself on camera, and at 2K, which is great. You know, most people don't have the they don't have the know-how to do that. She did a great job of lighting and stuff. I wanted to try seeing if people recorded themselves for us, if I could work with that in the edit bay and turn it into professional quality. But as I'm watching it, and she's telling her story, which is really something,
Hmm.
uh, I saw something fly by,
Really?
white and glowing, and I went, now I'm in an edit bay with professional equipment, and I can slow that sucker down and look at it and then zoom in on it. And what I observed was that and I've seen this before in videos from a long time ago. My friend of mine shot it when he interviewed a woman with paranormal experiences. You could see these little rod things, this little rod thing, fly at her, go into her head, and then come back out again, which ruled
Wow.
out any kind of bug. I
Yeah.
don't think they're bugs anyway because they were too bright and noticeable. And she's inside a house. Um, and then as I'm watching the video, I kept seeing them again and again and again. And then I saw what looked clearly like a rod, and then several of them at the same time. And most people will say, "Oh, those are just some kind of little white flies or bugs in her kitchen."
Yeah.
No,
No.
she knew about it. She said, "Oh, you saw that," and says it's happened before when other people have filmed her. So
Yeah.
clearly, there's something attracted to her, and she called them elementals. Have you ever had that from any of your clients or any videos that you had taken or seen?
Well, like I have clients send me things or give me things, and like I have one
Sure.
interesting on a loop of balls of light out in the water, moving around different colors, and
Wow.
that they had been watching. And orbs, they'll always say, oh, it's, moisture, dust, and a lot of them are, I mean, I'll be
Yeah,
the first
sure.
to admit that. But yeah, it's always strange when you see something just move through like that, like what you're talking about. It almost moves different. And there's like, I know at my cousin's wedding that my dad had passed, and her dad, my uncle Bud, that I told you about. And it was weird. We were all lined up, and there were a couple spaces where there weren't heads, and there was an orb in each one, like a head size orb. And, and I just kind of thought, yep, there it is. And
Yeah. And they're in focus and you're not looking through a camera and so yeah.
yeah, yeah. And, there's a lot of effects like lights, a lot of people that I know that have experiences don't wear watches because they'll just die. They get around electronics and go haywire. And the funniest thing was my husband's family, two of his sisters independently told us that they affect electrical things. And he doesn't think of his family as having this stuff at all. And then the one niece told of an experience where there was this family that was trying to get her to go with them when she was walking home in the alley, and had fluorescent eyes of different colors. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's that kind of stuff. I'm sure most people, there's a number of people that they've just put it out of their head. They've just compartmentalized. And
Yeah, that's natural.
yeah, that actually happens with my husband because, like, when he had had heart surgery, we were going to go to a medical supply place where we're very close to the house, and the street, it was pointing towards Beach Boulevard, which is a major street. And so we're just like a block away, and then across the street there's a light pole, and I look up and I see something kind of move like a wing, and then it just locks in, and it's like a diamond shaped, probably 3 to 4 foot thing just sitting there. And it's probably out from the light pole like 3 feet. And I'm going, do you see that? And he looked up and he goes, is that a kite? And I'm like, no, it's just sitting there. And I watched it for probably 3 minutes, and he had my phone because he didn't have a phone at the time. And this is a while back. And but he looked at it, and then I looked over at him for a split second, and it was gone. And then he remembered it for a few days, and then it just left his brain. Like he just kind of like he doesn't know what I'm.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I've literally pointed out the window at something and gone, do you see that? Because it was something weird that I'd seen the night before, and he couldn't see it.
And you didn't forget it and he did. And yeah, I've told this story before, but you may not have heard it. And I'm going to keep it very short. But I was on an astronomy trip with an old friend I still know to this day. A very large sphere appeared alongside of us, and he was standing there frozen,
Mhm.
looking at it. And he did talk to me, and he told me not to go over to it. And he was scared to death. After it left, he wanted to just pack up our telescopes and just get out of there. When we got back, I'm just doing the short version, but when we got back the next morning, he told my late wife all about it. She remembers it. She remembered it well. Um, 2 weeks later, he had no memory of it at all,
Yeah.
none. But he did tell me he was having nightmares about a bright light flying around his Sausalito apartment, shining lights into his house.
Wow.
And I just said nothing because
Yeah.
he was a Saganite. He's a member of the Planetary Society with Bill Nye and all those real lunatics. And so I'm not going to go there. But yeah, they don't remember.
Yeah. It just seems baffling, but yet I'm sure it's It's kind of like how I've probably met more people in the UFO field. Like I couldn't have even tried to meet that many just by being around Yvonne and being sucked into this. And I even had a client that sister wrote a screenplay about John Mack. She had the rights to his life. And she goes,
Wow.
"Do you know who John Mack is?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I mean, it's just strange. And then when I started hearing all this stuff from, family and connected, and I thought I guess I was just supposed to live my normal life as much as I could. And even like our house was haunted in Claremont. I would have figures at the end of the bed. I never slept right. I would go to sleep like in a stiff position, keeping an eye on my closet, the door, the window. And in hindsight, I'm thinking probably some of the figures weren't ghosts.
Yeah. Well, it's all connected anyway. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
just the whole thing of being on the other side is something that they're very good at. And so are we, but we just don't remember. And it just seems like they're trying to get us to make that connection. So, and now goes my nose again. Every time I talk about this subject matter, nose runs. So,
Yeah.
we have a few minutes left here before our hour is up. I sound like I'm a hypnotherapist. Just make our time is up. No, but I wanted to talk about your work because um, there's a number of people watching right now, and but later on, these live streams get into thousands of views, and a lot of these people may be near you or
Mm,
within the area
yeah.
and want to know how to reach you and exactly what you do when you do regressions on them if they have concerns about having these experiences. So you should probably talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I have an office in Newport Beach, and I do past life regressions and then alien abduction
Mhm.
regressions, and then I also do readings, but that was kind of where I started. Um, and usually the people that need to find me do, but my website
Mhm.
is kimtrotman.com, which is,
It's
my
it's
name.
very easy to find, and I should have the link up here. But if you type in Kim Trotman into, well, I mean, even without putting certified hypnotherapist at the end of it, it got you right away, and there was your website.
Yeah. And there's things like, I used to lecture at Chapman University, and I had learned to spoon bend from Jack Houck, who was really an interesting character. I think he lived in Huntington Beach, but so I would teach the college students how to spoon bend, like kindergarten spoon bending. I got to the high school level because I buckled a bowl in half. But so sometimes people want me to teach them to bend spoons, but it's all just psychokinetic energy. And
Right.
with the hypnosis, usually I just kind of get a little synopsis of what's going on. And then, yeah, we just see what we can uncover. And they're very similar, in the approach. And I usually try to get people pretty deep so they can not panic, but I like to do them in person for that reason. But, I know like with Yvonne Smith that specializes in that, she'll do it over Zoom. And
Yeah. They're
I,
they're asking about that right now. You have a question up from Rachel, who is
oh, okay.
part of
Yeah.
our community.
Yeah. So I I'm willing to give it a shot. I just haven't, because I sometimes, like that client with the mantis beings or ant beings, she was just shaking, like I was glad I was with her,
Yeah,
so,
I can see that.
but not everybody, has the luxury to travel or, is in the
No,
area.
no,
So
and there aren't people who do the work that you do and Yvonne does and Barbara does in every town.
right.
It just doesn't happen. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so definitely, oh, I see. Yvonne makes sure someone's in the room with them. And yeah, that makes sense,
and
that,
that's very smart.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it can get kind of freaky, but sometimes it can get freaky for the hypnotherapist too, because that time that Yvonne tried to bring me out and could not
oh wow.
because the big female gray that I've dealt with all my life was standing over me saying, why do you listen to her? Don't you know she can't help you? But I don't want to let you go. I won't. And
Oh,
I'm telling this to Yvonne, and I hear 1, 2, 3, wide awake. And finally she let me go, very dramatically. And
yeah. Well,
I came to, and Vaughn said, "What the hell was going on?" I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, but I had never, and I had done maybe 30 sessions to that point with Yvonne.
yeah, in the alien abduction ones, I've had a number of times they get up in their face, with their eyes,
They
and
become present during the hypnosis.
yeah, they'll say they're here. I mean, one of my clients, she's like an Orange County housewife, real attractive, had me do a reading party. They were having wine, and then I thought she should do a past life regression before, and she all of a sudden decided she wanted to do one. And 11:30 at night, I'm like, okay. So the first time she went to Salem witch, experience in 1642, and but the next time, she just blurted out, that she was squishy under her feet. She was in the desert. She was talking like a little kid. And I asked her how old she was, and she said she was 5. And no parents, no buildings. It's night. I'm kind of worried she got like kidnapped at some point or something. And then she said, I have a friend. And I and her friends are looking at me, and I'm like, what's your friend like? And she started giggling and said he looked like Jack in the Box. He was tall and white with big dark eyes, and I'm like, oh. And so then I asked her when she had first met him, and she said at my tea party, and she was in her room, and he showed up there, and I said, do your parents know about him? And she started giggling, no. And then she started describing being up on this big craft and all the tables, and there were other kids up there and other tall white aliens. And
Mm-hmm.
she had no idea. She was weirdly good at spoon bending,
Yeah.
And yeah, she's very psychic, but she's not, it's not like a big thing in her life either. But it's so funny because you just don't know when that'll pop out of somebody. And, it's maybe for the best. Like her husband's like in finance, not at all interested. My
Yeah,
husband,
I hear that a lot.
yeah. So,
It's rare
and
that the husband's interested too,
yeah,
or
sometimes,
vice versa, or the wife is interested when the husband has it. So
yeah. And I don't know if that's alien genetics or what that's about.
I don't know. But listening to her having a memory of being in Salem, it makes me wonder how many people were burned as witches because they were part of this.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but you're
Yeah,
right.
because from what I know from my experience, evidently I've been doing this for a long time, and it's all been part of something that's part of them. And we don't have time to talk about it right now, really in detail. But most of the people here know what I'm getting at, and wow,
Yeah,
I wonder how many people suck, because we've talked about it on
yeah,
Signal, and how many people have been killed because they have this interaction with this non-human intelligence, and by people who were terrified of them in their bendings of spoons, or in my case, backing out screws from walls and chairs, and hopefully not my cars.
yeah. And I have had a number of people in past life regressions go back to other lives on other planets. I had one girl that was seeing an eye, and I said, okay, look at it. And then all of a sudden she sucked through it and she saw pyramids, and she said, this is alien shit, isn't it? This is alien shit. And
Yeah.
she was on another planet, and that's not uncommon.
So,
It's surprising, but yeah, not uncommon. So,
yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
really think that we've been part of it all along. I don't know if everyone who has these experiences is that, but I think many of us are. So,
Yeah.
wow. Terrific. This has been a great hour. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I really need to get, well, you have support group meetings too, but are those Cyril or are they your own?
There's Sarah. Yeah,
They're
I just
Cyril. Yeah.
back Yvonne up and
They're not open to the public. They're not open to the media. Anything that happens in those meetings stays in the meetings. And that's how we do things too. But if you work with Kim, you'll be able to get involved in that. And it's very helpful to sit around and have a nice time talking about this stuff openly and eating some nice food and being friends. And you go home feeling better about the whole thing.
yeah, everybody's had their own things, and sometimes memories will come forward in the meetings. Like there's been a couple of people that were having a weird thing with a plane, and then they realized it wasn't a plane, or that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So definitely, yeah.
Well, cool, Kim. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you again after all this time, and hope we talk to you more often. And
Yeah.
thank you for being on our show. And
My pleasure.
had a great time.
All righty, great. It was good talking to you.
Thank you, everybody, for the support. And remember, do join us. Become a subscriber or become a member. It's very helpful to keep this channel going. So, and there's Mary. I see Mary's face. Were you going to say goodbye to? There you are. Yeah, thank you, Kim. All right.
Thank you.
See you next time, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.